Hey, welcome to our 12th podcast. I'm Jeff Baum and my co-founder of our firm, Clients First Marketing and Communications. John Clendenning is on screen as well. Today's a special broadcast. It's kind of retrospective with some really good insights on where people are going in our careers and where the whole craft of journalism is going. My friend, co-founder, partner, all that stuff, John Clendenning, just posted an article to LinkedIn this morning, looking back 40 years to his graduation from college. And his question was, if I had to do it all over again, if I had to go to college all over again, would I have made different choices? Am I happy with where I've ended up? Am I happy with what I've contributed and with where I'm going? And I read it. I think it's really good. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yes, posted on LinkedIn and Facebook this morning. Very, very proud of the piece. You know, there are certain milestones in life that when they hit you, you find yourself thinking back to that day or that time in your life and all that has happened since. And one of those milestones in my life is upon me now. And actually, it's upon you too, Jeff. 40 years ago this month, so we are recording this on May 1st. You'll see this, you'll see this the following week, but 40 years ago this month, both Jeff and I graduated from our respective colleges. Do you remember your graduation day, Jeff?
I do. I do.
Some of it?
Yeah, most of it. Most of it. I think we had a retired admiral speak at my.
Nice.
Everyone else got Joe Paterno, but we got a retired admiral.
Hey, you can't really lose either way there. To Jeff's point, yes, posted a LinkedIn piece this morning all about this, and it was basically done in the form of a letter to my 22-year-old self. And I hope you enjoy it if you get a chance to read it. My message, not to bury the lead, is to stick to your guns and what you did in terms of choosing to major in not just journalism, but print journalism. And yes, we're going to get into all that's happened to print journalism since then. My message is you did the right thing, despite all that would happen later to your profession of, again, especially print journalism, and why you did the right thing, right? And there's really just one main question. Two main questions, but I guess the first one is really the main question. And I posed this in the teaser language on LinkedIn. Would you choose the same major in college if you had a chance to do it all over again? What a compelling question that is, right? And regardless of that, of the answer to that, this is the second question. To what extent did you end up leveraging what you learned as part of your studies, right? So it's one thing to say, I am glad, I would major in that again, but regardless of the answer to that, to what degree have you ended up leveraging what you studied? And I think this is a valid question, whether you're 40 years out from college or even just 5 years out from college. As we know, Gelman is our producer. She is 5 years out of the University of Georgia, to which I say, yes, Jeff, join me. Go dogs.
Go
Go dogs,
dog.
baby. That's right.
But this is not a podcast about nostalgia. The meat of what we're here to talk about is something, Jeff, that you and I have been actually talking a lot about of late, in part because of some client work we're doing. The main issue for me is, that I think is a fair question for someone to ask is journalism dead? Right? And if it's not dead, is it at least mortally wounded? To the extent we can agree that journalism isn't what it once was, this is another question I would pose. Is that a bad thing? What are the sacrifices that society is having to make as a result of there being fewer traditional media sources available? Think about these questions. These are really big questions. I'm going to take a combination of the first and second ones first. The answer is no, in my view. I do not think journalism is dead. And those who suggest that it is, I believe they're just, pardon the pun, dead wrong. And frankly, we should hope that they're wrong, because if journalism is dead, we are in a lot of trouble as a society. a lot of people think we're in a lot of trouble as a society anyway,
Yeah, regardless of journalism.
right? But if you don't think it could be worse, it would be worse without journalism. Having said that, yeah, I think it is fair to say that in the year 2025, uh, the profession of journalism is wounded, especially in comparison to the pedestal upon which journalism essentially sat way back in the dark ages, Jeff, of 1985, when you and I walked across that stage and did the tassel and entered the working world. And what has led to this? What has led to journalism not being what it used to be, despite its ongoing critical importance, and we'll get to some of those reasons, to society? What's happened to journalism to make it get to the point where people are actually saying it's dead or it's at least mortally wounded? Well, three things happen. Three humongous things happen. Have you ever heard of this guy, Al Gore, Jeff? Al Gore.
Yes.
Yeah,
Wasn't he the guy who invented the internet?
he is. He is allegedly
Former
the guy who
vice
founded the.
president as well, but that's okay.
What's that?
A former vice president and U.S. senator as well.
Yes, former, and by the way, a former journalist. I believe he started his career as a journalist. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So yeah, Al Gore, supposedly everybody likes to make jokes about it, invented the internet. Well, what happened? First of all, it changed the world essentially overnight and has changed the world, I think, largely for the better since then. People all of a sudden were able to get their news and information instantaneously. Now, you didn't always have to wait for the next morning's paper to come. You could watch the evening news, you could listen to the radio. But, as I posed, the question I posed in my piece was, who wants to wait for the next morning to see the hockey scores, right? If you could just look at them on your computer. If you think about it, what legacy media had on their side pre-internet was control, essentially, if you think about it, control of news and information. We generally speaking, had to wait for it, for when they were ready to deliver it, whether it was on a newspaper cycle or a TV cycle or a radio cycle, right? Okay, fine. That changed things. Well, what happened next? Do you ever heard of a guy, Jeff, named Steve Jobs?
I
Some
might have
IT
heard
guy.
of him. He's
Some IT guy.
with a company named after a fruit, I believe.
I don't know if he invented the smartphone. I don't know about that, but I think it's generally agreed upon that he's the one who popularized the smartphone more than anyone, and it very quickly began to run our lives, right? And again, as I post in the LinkedIn piece, well, who wants to wait to get in front of your computer to see the hockey scores? Now you can get them on your phone wherever you are, right? So what's happening in the meantime to newspapers? They're losing control of the information flow, right? And then the next thing that happened, the third leg of the stool, if you will, was this thing called social media. Have you heard of that, Jeff? It's this new thingy,
Yes.
social media. So
I've been active on it. Not
you've
that,
been active on
but
it,
I've
yeah.
been active.
Well, I'm not sure who started it, but I did look it up, and 2004 is the year when social media became the term that we use it for today, right?
Mhm.
So what did social media do? Well, essentially, it gave us all the ability to express ourselves to the public, right? It gave us all of the ability to essentially, if you will, be journalists. Now, that's a good and bad thing, right? It's a good thing that everybody can share their views with the world. This serves I think, the great purpose of democratizing news and information, right? Why should we always have to wait for it to be filtered through somebody else? I think generally speaking, that's a good thing. Why is it a bad thing? Well, a lot of these opinions that are posted are either disguised as news or people take it as news, right? And so a lot of times we see information on the internet and we take it as gospel. Much of this information we take as gospel isn't really news, it's just commentary. There's a huge difference between news and commentary. Now,
Or John, it's propaganda as well.
propaganda, absolutely. If stuff gets posted on social, whether it's sensible content or not, there's none of the analyzing or the sourcing or the proofing that goes into content, making it into a newspaper, right? But people either don't care or just don't have the time for that because they take it as gospel. And so I tend to think that's bad. And then in the meantime, many of these opinions, more and more of them over time, are being expressed on either the far right side of center or the far left side of center. And what happens when that happens? And I think we talked about this a couple of podcasts back when you did your LinkedIn piece. It moves people away from the center.
Right.
Right? And all of a sudden, because of algorithms and things like that, you're just getting fed the information that you want to hear wherever you are on that political spectrum. And what happens then? We get more and more separated as a society. As a centrist, I consider that to be quite negative and largely unfortunate. So when you
Agreed.
roll all of that together, you get the following: fewer traditional media outlets, especially, and I'm trying to tie this to my major of print journalism. Think about this factoid. This blew me away when I researched it. Just since 2005, 3,200 newspapers have shut down. 3,200. I believe this is just in the United States, which means there are fewer and fewer jobs for journalists all the time.
Mhm.
Who wants to major in something that is producing fewer and fewer jobs, right? That would give me reason for pause if I was 20 and trying to figure out what to do. By the way, the new definition of the apocalypse, and I'm going to apologize to PR people later on the podcast, is there are now 6 PR people for every journalist. That's a little disturbing if you think about it. And we are generally considered PR people. We do more than that, but that's one of the main things we do. Loss of credibility. This is the most disturbing factoid of all. As of 2025, this is a brand new survey. Public trust in mass media has sunken to an all-time low of 31%. Less
Mhm.
than 1 in 3 of us trust the media. And that puts journalism in the category of lawyers and politicians. Kind of like no jobs. Who wants to major in something that means you're going to have to dodge tomatoes being thrown at you for the rest of your life? There's a lot of stuff going on here that would, I think, legitimately prompt someone in college today trying to figure out what to major in, that would prompt someone to question whether journalism was really the right way to go. And even if they love writing, even if they love news, even if they're very curious, which you have to be as a journalist, I get the hesitation. Now, later in this podcast, I'm going to turn it over to you in a minute, Jeff.
Mhm.
I'm gonna detail some reasons why I think it's still a positive to consider majoring in journalism and or all things communication. If you go to a comms school, you don't have to major in journalism. There are related things you can major in as well. We'll get to that later in the podcast. But question for you, Mr. Baum.
Mhm.
You're also experiencing your 40-year anniversary from your college graduation. What would you say to your 22-year-old self? Would you major in what you majored in again? What do you think?
Yeah, I would. I would. I thought about it a long time, and I know I've talked to you about it, John. Um, I would major in journalism again because it gave me the tools I needed to, work in this industry all these years, all these decades now. I learned how to write well. I learned how to take in information well. I learned to be strategic in what I wrote. I learned to do things quickly. All those things really contribute to what we do as communications professionals and PR people. Um, I'm thinking back, what held me back the most? And it was all personal stuff. I had a fear, I had anxiety. Um, when you're presented to people who were of higher standing, I thought, ooh, what should I do in meeting this person? And it was about halfway through, then everything clicked. It flipped over that, well, what do I have to fear? I really don't have anything to fear. They may disagree with me, they may agree with me, they may not take my call, but what is that to me personally? And that's a good way to kind of depersonalize all this stuff. If you're feeling all these emotions based on how people react to you, you're not going to work out well, and your career is not going to be very long. So, once I got over that, I think I was kind of off to the races. And I was able to, punch my ticket in lots of different areas. I had pretty well a very diversified career, and I kind of learned that journalism's more than, a science. It's an art. Once you learn how to communicate with people, advocate, everything that anyone in our field does takes that in. I mean, if you're a lobbyist, if you're a lawyer, if you're a salesman, if you're a PR consultant, all those things flow together. So I'm happy with where I turned out, the way I turned out, where I went. And I was just talking to someone relatively recently about life. If you look in a car, if you're riding in a car, that windshield is a lot bigger, a lot wider than that rear view mirror. So why are
Mhm.
you looking in the rear view mirror all the time? All the stuff that's ahead of you, all those possibilities, all those threats, all those benefits, they're all in front of you. And if you keep that attitude, you're going to do well. And my final point would be, so what's happened to journalism? It's evolved. It's evolved like everything else. Computers being invented. We don't use typewriters anymore. We have the internet out there. We've got high-speed information flow. Theaters are dying because you can sit home and watch movies on Netflix.
Right.
Bookstores are dying because all that information you rely on is available right on your internet. Media is changing because of just what John said. You want those sports scores and everything else immediately. News is largely moved over to social media. So is that wrong? Is that different? It's almost like, and this is going to sound really goofy, but if you look back to like the history of democracy and go back to ancient Greece, that was direct democracy. Everybody got together in a room
That's right.
and shouted what they wanted. Was that effective? Well, in changing the world, yes. But we moved on from that to representative democracy, which I think that's what we are right now. So what we need to do is make sure that we don't go into that authoritarianism or another direction. And I'm confident we won't. And I think a lot of that will be due to people like us and people like you. You got to care. You got to care about where the world's going. You got to separate it from yourself and your urge to be wealthy and everything else. What's my legacy going to be? What good did I do during my life?
I love that, Jeff. That's good stuff. By the way, that ancient Greece thing you described, it sounds like modern day UK government debating, right?
It is.
Just without the wigs, right?
That is true.
And
But
those people go
okay.
nuts. They go nuts.
They-
They really go nuts in those things. Very entertaining. So yeah, so I agree with all of that. So yeah, traditional. Let's talk about this for a minute. Let's talk about trust in traditional media, right? Versus trust in social media, right? I mean, clearly, I mean, I don't want to make it sound like I'm bashing social media. I mean, it is the place to be these days for so many reasons. But let's look at this 31% thing. People, the general trust in, I believe it's in mainstream media is 31%. I take that with a grain of salt when it comes to traditional media, because so I saw the survey, and I started researching, and other polls suggest that people trust information that comes from traditional media sources more than they trust information that comes from social media sources. And why is that? I believe it's because people inherently know that there is a process that goes on with traditional media. There's a process of analysis and vetting of the information and proofing and sourcing and all this stuff, right? That process doesn't occur. It occurs. That process, I was going to say that process doesn't occur with information that's posted on social. That's true if an individual is doing it. You can say whatever the hell you want to say, right? Now, if a company is posting something on social, you would hope that there's still responsible behavior going on before it's posted. But hey, I mean, before a story shows up in the Wall Street Journal, you all out there would be amazed at how many hoops that content has had to jump through before it gets onto the page. And yes, that page is more of a digital page now than a paper page. It doesn't really matter. It's still the Wall Street Journal. So why are people hoodwinked by this a little bit? Why don't people care more about that? Why would so few people trust mainstream media if they know that, right?
John, I think, what we're talking about there, or what you're talking about is if you're told every day it's fake news, it's from the deep state, it's whatever else, you start to believe it. And that's what folks try to do with traditional media. No, believe us. And if you say something that's not true enough times, in people's minds, it becomes true. So I think that's kind of what's driven this. And, it's going to continue to drive it.
Well, I do think that has an effect. Yes, it has an effect in the United States. It is having an effect in the United States. It's having an effect in other places like Venezuela, where journalists are being jailed, things like that. But I would also say that the slide in trust of media predates 2016 when Trump came to office. It's been slowly sliding for a long time.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. And, I think some of it is just, we're just busier than ever. We have more information sources bombarding us 24/7. I guess my point would be, I would go back to what I said earlier. I think a lot of people take commentary as news. Commentary isn't news. Sean Hannity is not a journalist. I'm sorry. He's a commentator. There's nothing wrong with being a commentator. It just means you're not a journalist.
Like it is. He's a commentator.
He's a commentator. He's not a journalist. Journalists are all about objective information, news. Now, that's not a political statement. I say the same thing about his counterparts on CNN. Don Lemon, or, the guy that they got rid of, and who's the other guy, Cuomo, that they got rid of?
Yeah.
They're not journalists either. They're commentators. But people take this stuff as news, and it's so polarizing that it just poisons the well for journalism in general. It just does. But I do think you're right. When you have, the leader of the free world and other leaders of other countries just bashing the media left and right, yeah, it does. How can that not have an effect, right?
On the trust in socials too, just from my perspective, a lot of times, and this is not across the board by any means, but a lot of times, at least for me, when I see quote unquote news on social media, right? You're right. It is a thought in my mind that where are they getting this from? Because of that exact vetting process. But also too, the benefit is a lot of times on socials, I see that people have done the work, quote, for me by looking all of these things up and finding the connections between them and making it a succinct 1-minute video rather than me having to read article after article after article to find the connections myself. So in a way, I see the positives, but I absolutely agree that I lean on that vetting process to actually find what is backing this commentary.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's a positive that there are platforms and sources out there that do a lot of this research for us. You just hope that if news is being presented, it's actual sourced real news. And if it's not, it's commentary. But I guess my point would be, I'm not sure people know the difference anymore, really. It's really troubling. So let's touch on my third question that I posed earlier. What bad comes from having less real journalism, if you will, right? 3,200 papers shut down. They say, let us count the ways, right? None of them are good. Fewer local media outlets means the public receives less civic information. And data shows that negatively affects voter turnout, which by definition harms democracy. Okay, that's one offshoot result of fewer journalists. Okay, less media coverage, less traditional reported, sourced, real media coverage, right? also directly leads to an increase in bureaucratic corruption. Why is that? Because one of the jobs of journalism is to keep power in check. And it's just the way of the human race. You got fewer people watching you. You know, they say, what do they say? Real character is what you're doing when no one's watching, right?
Right.
Yeah, well, in too many cases, there's not enough people watching. So, shocker, more corruption. Okay. Number three, I got two more. Fewer objective news sources give rise, and I mentioned this, to biased media, which deepens an already deep societal divide, which again, as a centrist, I find very disturbing. And then the last thing is, and we've touched on this, lack of journalistic freedom gives easier rise to authoritarian regimes. And that's not just a comment on the US. I mean, so
Yeah.
it's just, you know, and I think I used this term or referenced it in my piece, news deserts. What does that mean? Wherever you live, there's just less news around you. So you're just you're just not as informed. It's just not good if things like democracy, accountability, and trust are things that you support, it's just not good.
Well, I think the news, like on the economy right now, is really stilted. It depends on who you listen to. If you listen to
Absolutely.
traditional journalists, they see one thing. If you listen to certain politicians, they see an opposite thing. So there's like an ulterior motive. Um, and one of the things that's happened with the way journalism's evolved is you could take a look at publications and video news, on the internet or on TV, and you can characterize those channels. Oh, Fox Business, okay, that's going to be super conservative. CNN, it's going to be liberal. MSNBC, it's going to be even more liberal. And maybe Bloomberg cuts it down the middle. You're going to feel like that. You're going to look at newspapers. You're going to see, oh, the New York Post. Well, I don't know whether that's a Murdoch paper, but that's super conservative. If you look at the New York Times, oh, it's super liberal.
Right.
You look at the Wall Street Journal, well, that's so respected, but it's also owned by Rupert Murdoch. So how do you cut that out? And you've got the Washington Post owned by Jeff Bezos. So you
Yeah.
can't really separate out all those things. And I think we ought to try to do that. And unfortunately, it comes down to guys like John, me, and a lot of you out there. How do you separate that out? So I think that's one of the things we need to focus on. And let's take a look at trends coming up. Artificial intelligence, largely,
Mm.
I've seen it actually, ChatGPT has evolved to the point where if it writes something for you, it cites where it found the information at the very bottom, which is a brand new feature. And I think, to the concern that John had, and there are lots of concerns over AI, but I think that's one step in the right direction. And then finally, down the road more is quantum computing, which is going to make everything obsolete. So, do you want to enter the world with skepticism and fear, or maybe a hope that all these things are going to turn into something better? And I'd like to add with that. I truly believe we're going to see the edge of the cliff and turn around.
You talk about it, anxiety and the anxiety of being in your 20s, right? You and I were talking at Gelman about this before we turned the red light on here. And the anxiety of being in your 20s, it can be a real tough time for people, right? You're out of school now, okay? You've been a student your whole life. Now you're in the quote real world. Now what do you do, right? Regardless of what you majored in, right? Yeah, let me go back to grad school, and some people do that so they don't have to deal with reality, right? But it can be a tough time. And I guess my advice would be believe in yourself. Believe in yourself. And this stuff that you bring up, Jeff, AI and quantum and all this stuff, right? The good news, if you're a 20-something today, you understand that stuff way more than we do, right? So embrace it. Embrace AI as your friend. If you're 26 years old or 28 or whatever, you can be the person at the agency or in the office to whom people turn to explain it. What does that do? It increases your value to your employer, right? So embrace it. Believe in yourself. Believe in yourself. That's all I can say. And part of the reason I say that is even when you're 40 years out, you still don't have all the answers. The 28-year-olds might think we do, but it's a journey. It's a journey. So just believe in yourself. Yeah, some closing comments. If you're a working journalist out there, congratulations to you for having joined what many people, and it's somewhat of a dated term these days, having joined the fourth estate. You have chosen a profession that plays a central role in democracy. Think about that for a minute. Most people can't say that. A central role in democracy. At the same time, well, that sounds like a pretty heady thing, right? But many of you, most of you probably don't reap these great financial rewards that other people do. All those business majors, they're the ones making all the money, right? Sounds like teachers, right? So critically important, and you make a lot of sacrifices. So, I would say keep doing what you're doing if you're a journalist, whether it's popular or not. Keep exposing the bad guys. Keep writing the positive stories. We need them more than ever now, and everything in between. And at a time when we trust your work less than ever before, don't let that get to you. Because again, I call BS on some of those poll numbers. Maybe that's what you mean by we're going to head up to the cliff and then pull back. I don't know. So
If you're not going to just jump,
yeah, exactly.
a better alternative. Well, we're
That's
going
right.
to do something smart.
Yeah, exactly. If you are a PR person, just kidding about the apocalypse, right? The fact that there's 6 of you to every one working journalist is not the apocalypse. I was just trying to make Jeff laugh. PR is often misunderstood, is it not, Jeff? Just as journalism is.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And most people, there's a joke that is pretty common in PR that you can't really explain to your mom what you do, right? If you're in advertising, oh, look at that ad, right? I made that ad, or I made sure that ad appeared in that magazine at on page 47, right? PR is really hard to explain what the heck you do. Celebrity publicity is one thing. I think people get that. But if you're a corporate PR person, A, it's hard to explain what you really do. But B, it is really hard work. It's really hard work. You're constantly caught in the middle. The C-level people around you, they want X. The journalists to whom you're pitching the corporate stuff, they want Y. And no matter what you do, there's a tug there, and you're caught in the middle, and it's really hard to make both ends of that rope happy. It's really hard. Yeah, you get paid more. You tend to get paid more than you do if you're in journalism, and that's fine. But I suppose what I'd say to that is, given the importance of building brand to the value of an enterprise, Jeff and I talk to clients all the time about our favorite factoid: 19.5% of brand value or of enterprise value can be assigned to brand value. Well, if you're a corporate PR person and you're responsible for an enterprise's reputation, frankly, you should be paid a decent wage, right, Jeff?
Absolutely.
And we are, but you're probably also underpaid as well. And then lastly, and I think most importantly here, if you are a student trying to determine what to major in college, I strongly urge you to think about not necessarily print journalism if you don't think it's for you, but at least think about communications. Now, here's another disturbing factoid, Jeff. Enrollment, and we know this from some of the client work we're doing, enrollment at communication schools is down.
Yes.
And largely because of fewer journalism majors, but communication schools do more than educate journalists. But think about it this way: if you want to get into a college that's hard to get into, maybe apply to be a communications major, right? They want you right? You know the old trick. I can't get into the engineering school at A&M, so I'm going to apply as a sociology major, and I'll just transfer into the engineering school once I get to campus. Now, easier said than done, but there are people who try to play that game. Communication schools want you and need you. They want bodies. Now, let's take the Elon University Communication School, for which I serve on the National Advisory Board. So I know the school intimately, and Gelman's sister is a proud graduate of Elon. Think about these majors that you can choose if you're within the Elon University School of Communications: journalism, strategic communications, which they call Stratcom. That's what Gelman's sister majored in. Cinema and television arts, communication design. I have to admit, I'm not sure what that is. Sport management, media analytics, which is huge, and the newest major, which they've just launched, digital content management, which to me is a very powerful thing. So I guess I close with this. How about you? How about you? Whether you're 28 like Gelman, or 38 or 48 or 58, or you graduated from college 40 years ago this month like Jeff and I, would you choose the same major again? Regardless of the answer to that, again, to what extent did you end up leveraging all that you learned as part of that major? These are really interesting questions. Our arrival at this moment in time, Jeff, has really spurred a lot of introspection in my part about that. And yeah, as I said to my 22-year-old self in the LinkedIn piece, absolutely, I would choose it again. 100%. You learn so many things as a journalism major that you can apply to just about anything. You learn how to build relationships, how to interview people, how to call BS on people. You learn all about deadlines. You think about this. You learn how the world works, right? If you're going to write about a school board decision or a city council decision or a murder or whatever, you have to know what you're talking about, right? You have to know how to filter what you're hearing from all the sources that you're talking. I mean, there's just so much that goes into this that you can apply to just about anything you do. But anyway, I'll turn it over to you, Jeff. It's just such a great question. Would you do it again? My answer is yes.
Okay. Yeah, my answer is yes as well. It's been an interesting career, lots of twists and turns, but have I been happy during this career? And I'd say 90% of the time I have been, which is a pretty good percentage. So anyway, with that, let's wrap it up. Thanks again for joining us. The number of people following this broadcast keeps on increasing, but we'll take more. We will definitely take more. So if you want to know more about us, go to our website at clientsfirstmc.com. Or, of course, you can check us out on all the social networks, or at least, the ones that get the most exposure. I mean, we're active. We're every place. So again, thank you for joining us. Thank you for viewing our opinions with some credibility. I hope we can earn it. Anyway, until next time.
Thanks, everybody.